Today we're going to be discussing extraterrestrials and their reality in fifth density, as well as our divine blueprint, our current program going on here with these bodies that we inhabit. And if I have time at the end, I will discuss some dream messages that will give you some help. So let's start with the idea of fifth density extraterrestrials. And if you are following or new to my library, you'll have to catch up with the other videos. But I am discussing fifth density extraterrestrials, which are above the technology worlds, the Star Trek worlds of fourth density. So this is a very different reality. In fifth density, one of the planets that I have been shown, I will give you some examples of what is going on there. In this reality on this planet, the beings there, when they create a new life form, the one that I was shown is similar to us in that they showed me beings that have 2 legs and 2 arms, a head, eyes, because they're wanting to show me something somewhat similar to where we are in understanding in bodies, but they are nothing like our bodies, but they do have that look. And so how they create life on this planet, this planet's mixture of gases for survival there is not like Earth. We're talking fifth density, so you cannot go out and if I say it's like in this, the star there is Sirius or the star is Vega or whatever, you really cannot evaluate that civilization based on your third density understanding of reality. So you have to be able to understand the massive expansion of consciousness that it takes to be a fifth density being. In this reality, they are planetary, though, beings. They aren't star beings, which is sixth density. They are planetary beings. But in this reality, they are so one with the planet that the planet and their consciousness and the planet are very symbiotic. And the planet nurtures and helps to create life for them according to their conscious will. And so one of the ways they have developed creating new life forms, which is not done except at specific seasons on this one particular place I was shown, because the seasons on this planet can last years for one season, and then it might, years in human terms, and then it might flip to another season. So it's a particular season, or you might say 3, 4, 5 years of a season. I'm using Earth ideas. But in this season is when they would be doing the creation of new life forms. There was a plateau on this planet, an elevated plateau area, where a male and female being would go. And on this plateau, the Earth is, this is where, I'm saying the Earth is the wrong word. I'm using Earth as the planet, but let me just say the planet. This is where the planet has designated a place for these beings to give new life. So realize that this space that has been created, this you might say like a sacred plateau, has been created through the consciousness of the beings there in harmony with the planet. So the planet and the consciousness of the beings have determined this place for new life of their kind. And so the 2 male and female beings will go there and they will lie down on the ground facing each other and with some space between them, and the planet begins to rise up around them in like to use Earth terms, but these are not Earth species, realize. These sort of vines come up and embrace these two beings. And these two beings will, for essentially you might say, go to sleep, but their consciousness is expanded into a place of unity. They're already unified. I'll have to speak about that in a minute. But it goes to a place of peaceful unity. And you could say maybe asleep as an example. But they are in this sort of stasis mode for what you could say might be several days. And during this process, what is happening is there is a blending of the male and female energy in conjunction with the planet that is creating between them, between the space between them, they're facing each other, and the space between them, what is being created is a cocoon, is my best terminology for it. And this cocoon is made up of their planet's material and their male and female essence and their consciousness essence, as they are blending portions of their consciousness into a new life form. And this is different than what we do. It has nothing to do with how we give life here. We give life as a base animal. This is a conscious act with consciousness transference, portions of consciousness transference, and these male and female energy patterns, and the planet's more physical, if you want to use the word, although fifth density is not physical like us, but the more structured elements. So with all of this combination creates this cocoon. So once this period of time is complete, these two beings they get up and they walk away, and this cocoon stays with these sort of branch-like energy patterns from the earth sort of arcing over it. And when you look at this plateau from a higher perspective, there are these cocoons spread out all over this plateau, because this is the season for doing it. It's optimal for the planet, for the star that it is associated with, for the beings. It's just the optimal season, and it doesn't happen but in Earth terms several numerous years, maybe 4 or 5 years, every 4 or 5 years or something. So these cocoons stay there and they grow a life form that is perfectly harmonious with the patterns that were given it. And so now I will come back to that, but right now I want to go back to the fact that these beings that I saw, these fifth density, and this is the case for fifth density anywhere, fifth density beings are a collective consciousness. And when you see these beings gather in what I'm just going to call their village or their community, when you see them gathering in their community, their interaction comes from, I was allowed to see and witness this from my fifth density body's perspective, as well as from my own earth perspective, because my part of me is in there, but I am understanding it from a fifth density. I'm experiencing it more from a fifth density experience, and my human self is trying to understand it. So as I am experiencing this reality, I am aware of this collective consciousness. And this inside this collective consciousness, let's say you're in a space where there are 10 of these beings. In this collective, these beings are individualized. and they have their own growth through their divine blueprint. They are a unique avatar. But the consciousness is such that their sense of self is very minimal. They don't have an animal ego that we have. They have a sense of self, but the self is so pliable and so harmonious that it easily interacts with the collective. And so the collective, how that works is that all these minds, these consciousness, these minds, because everything is telepathic, but at this level it's even a more expanded kind of telepathic. But because it's all telepathic, or I would say without any ego walls whatsoever, so it may not even be, telepathic may not even be the right word for fifth density. But there are no walls. Like in fourth density, they're telepathic, but they also have a wall of ego. In this density of fifth density, the wall is so fluid and so transparent that the collective, the mind becomes, the thoughts become a collective group of thinking. And so this is how they might solve problems. This is how they come up with creative ideas. And this is how they function as a unit. They could stand in this group, and if they are trying to accomplish something, they would share their creative thought into the collective consciousness of the whole. And these creative thoughts are blended in such a way that everyone there is also receiving that knowing. And so one entity could immediately have access and have it available to them of the thoughts of a particular project they were working on from each other in the group. So all 10, I'm just using a small group, all 10 of these beings, their thoughts would be are put into a collective sort of consciousness, and you can access anything going on there and work. And then with that knowledge that you get from your group, you process it, and then you come up with the next level of it, and you add it back into the group, and then the group receives that. And now let's say you're working on an issue, and so now the group receives that, and then there's more creativity going on individually, and then individually something else is given birth through that individual consciousness into the collective, and now the whole is growing from that, and it's moved up into the level of solving the project or coming to a conclusion or an idea. And this is how it's working. So the individual puts in their information, the collective, all of them receive it, then all of us work with the information, and as all of us are working with the information, we come up with new ideas individually, put it into the whole then begins to work with the information, that sparks individual new ideas added back into the whole. I hope I'm explaining that good. And this process just goes and goes and goes and goes and goes. This is how they work. There is no computer technology at this level. I'm very clear on this. I've mentioned in the past that they have some sort of technology, but having lived in the body, in the reality, I can tell you it has nothing to do with the technology of third and fourth density. What I was experiencing was a collective mind solving issues and coming up with creative ideas, which is like a computer in that information is put in, and now you have a database, and this database is instantly accessed by the minds. But that is where the comparison sort of ends. So I wanted to explain this so that I can go on and talk more about it. So now when this gestation period is with the new life form, the new baby, is finished, part of this collective village or community will go back up to this plateau. And how they know that is that these little cocoons or pods or cocoons, they change frequency. There's a frequency they give off. So there's different levels of gestation going on this plateau, and when one of them is ready, there's a frequency that goes off that the two original beings immediately pick up on and immediately add to the collective thought. And so now this community knows one of these pods or cocoons is ready, and they go together in a group, and they surround the cocoon, and kind of like maybe the movie Avatar, when they were all at the tree and their little tails all connected them and they were all one consciousness. If you could kind of think of that movie Avatar, it's a little like that. They sit around or stand or sit near this, around this cocoon, and the collective is like giving birth. It's now not just these two, it's more the collective gives birth, and this cocoon sort of dissolves and a being is there, and this being is slightly different than the mature beings, in that I could say, for a comparison, you might say it's a young adolescent. Maybe some, if we were to compare, which you really can't, but let's say when they come out of this cocoon, they look more like they're 16 or 17 versus the other beings who look more like they're much older. So you can tell there's a slight difference in the body structure from the more mature beings. So now that is how this being now goes and works and learns to develop the collective consciousness. It's already been programmed, the word I can use, it's already been put in with their blueprints. In the divine blueprint, the programs and consciousness has already been added by the couple. And so it is immediately, when it becomes aware of self, because when it was in a cocoon, it was still in the collective. But when it is birthed, you might say, by the collective, it has a sense of self. In other words, it sees itself different from those around. So it will spend time learning how to balance and work with a sense of self, because it had been a collective consciousness a lot. And so its growing period is anchoring a sense of self-identity, a sense of a way to bring forth creativity, a sense of a way to gather in the collective knowledge and give birth to some idea from the collective knowledge. And it's going to learn how to do that. Okay, so now I want to move on to something else I saw on this same planet. In another area of this planet, there is a valley. I call it the Valley of Spheres, because when I went to see this place, this valley was covered in spheres. And you might say it looked like hills, because I call it a valley because it was surrounded in hills. But these hills were actually very large spheres that were up against each other in a pattern such as the spheres were malleable. So the spheres are not always perfectly round, but they might be kind of shaped in certain ways from being pushed against each other, so that it actually sort of had like a some undulating curves to it that made it look like what we would call hills or mountains. Not jaggedy kind of mountain ideas, but more like hills. So inside this hilly group of very large spheres was a valley of spheres. And this planet also gives birth to sphere beings, is the way I can explain it. These spheres are critical to the survival and life of the beings I just told you about. These spheres are amazing creatures, and I don't even want to call them like what we would say our pets, because they aren't like our pets, where there's a human and a pet, and they're like, there's this relationship. But the spheres are not the same, not totally the same consciousness type as the beings. Their consciousness is more, it's not as complex, but it can do very complex things because the beings have a very advanced consciousness that can impress upon the spheres information. Now, these spheres, when they're first sort of popped out of the ground or popped into existence in this valley, they can be all kinds of sizes, small and huge. I was watching them bounce around in the valley, kind of playful like you would see, baby animal cubs or, animals in their baby form, where they love to bounce and roll around and chase each other. These spheres would do this, the new spheres. They would bounce along the ground, they would bounce high, they would bump into each other. They're learning this idea that there is some barrier there, right, between themselves and others. So they have this, they bounce around, roll around, they chase each other, they learn to fly. So there's like this, it's just a whole valley of these spheres. Some are just newly created and acting like little kids. And there is on the sphere what I would call a lens. It doesn't look like an eye, but it would be the idea of a lens in that it has some visual perception of their reality. And these spheres also have a sense of touch for their reality. They have also a sense of sound. They respond to senses like we do based on their reality. And so they can do all kinds of things. So I learned that these more advanced conscious beings can take these spheres from this valley, and they can, with their consciousness and even with their collective consciousness, sort of add a program to these spheres to do things for them. So in this planet, back to the community, where they have habitations are sphere-like houses. They're sphere habitations. So you see in this community spheres that originally were round spheres. They have been given a function to be environmental housing, because there are seasons on this planet that during some seasons, remember these seasons last very long. There are some seasons where there are these particles that are in the atmosphere that are very heavy, and these beings like to go into this housing, these sphere houses, and they dwell in there. And there are seasons where these particles that are in the atmosphere are much thinner, which also creates a different kind of atmosphere. So these spheres are creating a habitat for these beings where they can go in and absolutely control the interior environment to what they want, regardless of the season that might be happening on the surface of their planet. They have these sphere houses that they can control perfectly. So these spheres are also brought out of this valley to become space vehicles. And so there's a whole area where these spheres are now given new programming to hold that same environment that's perhaps on the planet, but a more complicated environment that they can now move into these spheres and travel off their planet. And so the spheres, it's very important to understand at fifth density, all the so-called technology that is created there, whether it's buildings or spaceships or whatever they use, it's all created from their consciousness and the cooperation of the consciousness of the planet that they dwell on. There is absolute harmony with the planet. So the planet is like this gigantic collection of every kind of element, particle, every kind of piece, every kind of type of matter that they need to survive, but also this matter, these particles, these elements in the planet are also capable of being restructured and created into something else. And this is done by the will of the consciousness of the collective community in harmony with the planet, in that they want something they want to create something. They go to the valley of the spheres. They may have other things they create outside of this sphere valley. These are the two things I saw. They go to this valley of spheres. They take the sphere and they use the sphere to create some kind of structure that they can work with. Aside from the sphere valley, they may actually just work with the planet in other ways. But the point is, no technology is needed for survival. No kind of technology like we use. They don't even have that. They're totally using the elements of their planet and actually the elements of their star, some too as well, to create whatever they want. And so it's important to know, I'm going to sort of take a final overview of this. It's important to understand the consciousness of these beings is so far different than third density consciousness that it's going to be very difficult to connect to this level for where the evolution of our planet currently is. It's not impossible. There are thresholds that you can traverse where you can begin to incorporate that consciousness. But when you sit in those consciousness bodies that are created, the sense of self is so slight that the me that was the earth me was almost non-existent. It was just a thought in the background, because the self of a fifth density being is highly integrated into the collective consciousness. And to experience that, you really have to step into the unknown. I've done a number of videos recently on that higher consciousness is accessed in the unknown. And this is a concept that is so foreign to us. Our bodies here have been corrupted, which I've said in other videos, by this dragon snake. I'm going to use this as an example. Energy that entwines, that is buried in our DNA, and this energy pattern is controlling us by technology. Is one of the big ways it's controlling us right now. And all the kind of technology we're creating right now, even that which is very helpful to us, in other words, it helps us to survive, what it's helping to survive is the fallen program. So when we benefit from technology, and we all do, and I do too, we must understand what is benefiting. It is not our higher consciousness. What is benefiting is our fallen family lineage programming animal body is benefiting. Now, we may think, well, that's a good thing. It can heal us, it can nurture, it can do all these things. It is part of the known that we integrate into us that continuously keeps us in limitation. Because all technology is designed, and even before the technology came along, there was control programs of government and religion that was controlling the body of man. And now with government and religion, we also have the overarching fallen technology. This is all controlling man to think that he is all there is. A lot of you watching this video know there are other beings in the universe. So not that he's all that there is, but as far as other beings, but he has gotten this, he has inherited from the fallen fourth density lords of light a sense of God's self. Now listen very carefully to me. One of the things in the New Age is, and especially Indian religions, is all about we are gods. And even you can find that in the Bible, something stated about we are gods. But the phrase in the Bible is misinterpreted from, I think it was John. It was referring to a quote in Psalms and remember, all of this is fallen information. And when in the Psalms it was written about gods, they were speaking to the elect priesthood that was designed to be God's representative on earth, kind of like the kings and queens, right? And Caesar and all of them that set themselves up as gods or God's representative on earth. So this is, we have this idea that we can develop ourselves into a God-type being with this technology. This is not the path. This path which we're on, and I've mentioned it many times, is going to eventually be a path of de-evolution. Even though it looks like we're evolving, it's actually a de-evolutionary program, a retrograde program. So when this great migration occurs, which I've talked about in other videos, and a large amount of avatars whose consciousness normally get transferred straight into their astral body and they stay in their same identity. I'm Susan Smith, married to Joe Smith with all my children, and I go and I live with my dead relatives. This is what they do, and they live the same life. While you might, part of this migration is freeing yourself from the astral world and moving into fourth density, which is where most people are capable of going right now. The fourth density has been ingrained in us so much. It's those Star Trek worlds. It's this body that we have with more expanded consciousness than what we have, a more expanded consciousness. In other words, you're telepathic. They love to time travel with technology. That it's more expanded in that way, and so they're off planet. They can travel the stars. They have the technology to do that. That's where a lot of all of you guys who are into this whole UFO, New Age, spiritual movement are going. In this great migration, there will be some that can go into fifth density and some into sixth. But that wave will not really occur for a little while yet, because we have to, and I've said in another video, we have to create adults who have cleaned out their lineage and cleaned out all their entity attachments, so that they are a purified, advanced human, so that when they do the animal union to create a new life form, we use the sperm and the ova, the egg. They can create beings, humans, that can hold fifth density consciousness or experience fifth density consciousness, anchoring it so that they can go into these higher realms. So I want to say now a little bit about dreams. In your dreams, you can work with your divine blueprint. One of the ways you work with your divine blueprint in your dreams is a elevator. And I've done a private video for my Patreons about ways to know in your dream when you're expanding your consciousness. So this is also a similar idea of how you're expanding your consciousness. But in these dreams, instead of it being how I described in the Patreon video, this is more like an elevator. And these elevators are, instead of them being this journey that was in the Patreon video, these elevators, oftentimes you may step into a building in an elevator, but the building disappears. And in other words, there's just a shaft, an elevator. And sometimes you'll have the experience in the dream where it's just the shaft, the elevator, this tall tower. You go stand in front of the tower, it opens up, it looks like an elevator. You go into the elevator. Even if in the dream you go into a building and go into the elevator, the thing that's happening is when the doors open, even if you went into a building, when the doors open, there's nothing there. In other words, you would step out into nothing. It looks like you're standing and looking out at the sky. And as you go punch these buttons and you're going up this elevator and the doors open and you go to the edge and now you begin to see down how far you've traveled. You're traveling up your blueprint. This is how I'm going to describe this particular dream experience. It's like traveling up your blueprint, traveling up in consciousness, traveling up in awareness and frequency, so that which every time these doors open, you're a little bit more up in frequency or a little bit more up your blueprint. And when you look out, it is a sheer drop. And this is on purpose. The higher up you go this elevator, trying to get to the top floor, the more this tower where the elevator is held begins to kind of sway, like you're in a skyscraper, at the top of a skyscraper, and you know the wind can sway it. You begin to feel these movements in the elevator. And this is the pattern of the known freaking out over the unknown, because now the mind, which is also involved, the human mind in the dream plane, will begin to go, oh my gosh, the building is moving, the elevator is swaying, you know, thinking storms, collapse, fall over, and now it's experiencing a normal test of your known and unknown. Are you going to keep going up, keep punching the floors? Because as you punch the floors and open up, you realize there's nowhere to go. It's a sheer drop. So if you step out, there's this another unknown factor. When you go to step out, it's an unknown, but your mind will fill it in. Your human mind will fill in going, well, if I step out, I'm stepping out into nothing. I'm going to fall 30 stories. Or if you're at the 50th floor, I'm going to fall 50 floors down and crash and hit a bottom. That's the mind trying to fill in the unknown with a known fear. Remember, the mind is always filling in the unknown with the known. And most of the time that known is based on a fear. So these tests of rising up these elevators, they could also be stairs, spiral stairs. I've had a few of those spiral stairs. But the elevator is the one that I've had the most experience with. When you can get up to these higher floors, let's say 70 and 100 floors, however high your buttons are on the elevator, and you see these, and now the elevators are really, the whole thing is moving. It could be even spinning. I've had these elevators stop on a floor, and I feel like I'm spinning. And I'm thinking, even if the door opens, you're spinning and you're feeling unstable. You think the thing's your mind clicks in with the known, it's going to fall, it's going to crash. There's all these thoughts. These are patterns you're trying to break through as you're going up your blueprint to achieve higher consciousness. Now, let me tell you one way you know when you have sort of broken through these known fears and actually stepped into the unknown. And then I'm going to end the video close after this little discussion. One of the ways you can know, because I've experienced this is why I'm telling you, and I'm going to use an example from a movie, Raiders of the Lost Ark, the one they did with the Holy Grail, and the one where they were in like that cave system, and Indiana Jones went to this area where the Grail was on the other side of this large chasm, this large valley, and where he was ended and where he needed to go was on the other side of this valley, or this very large, Grand Canyon kind of idea. On the other side was where the Grail was. So he had to figure out how to cross from where he was standing, this open space of nothingness where he could fall off and crash, 100 floors, you might say, down to the bottom and kill himself. It's a death spiral. He had to figure out how to get from there to the other side. And man's mind, trying to fill in the known, would then sit there and go, well, technology, maybe I can throw ropes out there, maybe I can get my little, oh gosh, what are those little cameras, that for some reason my mind just went blank. The little cameras that can fly up, and take photos. And maybe I can get one of those to take a rope across or something. So the mind wants to fill in how to get from point A to point B with technology. When what really needs to happen is how Indiana Jones took some dirt and he threw it out into that open space, and what manifested was an invisible bridge that his eyes and mind, the known mind, could not see, but there was this bridge, not man-made, but a natural bridge from the same material, and he could cross that space on that bridge. But he had to first break out of the known way to solve the problem and take his mind into the unknown. And in the unknown, divine inspiration comes as to what to do. So when I was standing, this is how I learned this in comparing it to the Indiana Jones. When I was standing on one of these very high floors with the door open into this very steep fall that the mind would say would kill you, but my mind also was aware enough to know I could fly because I was conscious, and because I'm a conscious lucid dreamer, I can stand at that doorway and figure out ways to possibly fly or possibly do something a little different than maybe normally those of you who are dreaming this dream, who might just be terrified of falling out and falling down, hundreds of stories. Some of you might think, well, maybe I could just fly. So you're coming up with a more inventive idea. But the idea is to step off. This is the training in your dreams of going up your divine blueprint, is to, when you get to the top of this, wherever this elevator is letting you open this door, and you step off, then you have willingly stepped into the unknown. And you're not even trying to fly, which is again the mind saying, I'm in the astral world, or I'm in my dreams, I know I can fly, and that is a solution you're trying to apply to this. But the real test, which possibly you could, but that's not the test. You could also fall off and go all the way down and crash, but of course nothing's going to happen to you. But the test of this, when you experience these kind of dreams, is to actually step off without knowing what the next event is. And it's possible to do this also on a spiral staircase. When you get to the top of the spiral staircase, it's possible to do that. But I don't want to focus too much on a spiral staircase, because in these elevator dreams, when you're punching these buttons, there's no button to punch to go back to the bottom. I want to clarify that. The buttons only go up. And you can't go, oh, I'm too high, let me go back down to the 10th floor, or let me click, but you try. You try in the beginning, you try to click the button, ground button, but the elevator never goes down. So this is another thing about these dreams. The elevator's not going down. This elevator, my friends, is only going up. This conscious dream challenge is only going up your blueprint. So if you have these elevator dreams, the idea is to overcome the known and step out of the elevator into the unknown with no preconceived idea. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to tell you that I'm going to add some music in my Patreon group we're at the end of this month, December, so in January there's going to be some music added that will help you to get to the threshold of fifth density. Because I've been working with this particular piece of music, noticing how it is helping me to easily make contact with this fifth density frequency. So I'm going to put that in our Patreon group for my members. And I will see you in the next video. Thank you, friends.